Welcome to SCV Chat. I'm your host for the evening, Moose, and I'm joined by the legendary, my dad, Lieutenant Commander-in-Chief Jason Boseers. And before we get started, please remember, the views and opinions expressed on this broadcast are not necessarily the views and opinions of the SCV, its GEC, nor Division Brigade Camps or any of the subsidiaries. Hello, everybody. I see Mr. Sean is in the chat right now. Thank you for coming on. We're going to kill a little time because it said we're going live at 7:20, but of course we're going to go live at 7 o'clock. But the way Facebook is with scheduling, you can go live whenever you want to, but you have to set up the time to go live at least 20, 30 minutes before you actually schedule the event. And I'll explain, of course, why we had a change in schedule tonight and stuff like that. Tennessee SOCR present here. Hey! Mrs. Dottie is in the chat tonight. Always glad to have you on. Cousin Vinny is in the chat. Always great to have you guys on. But quick explanation of why we changed up today's schedule. We were originally going to do the last year's book review for today. Of course, today is Robert E. Lee Day in Mississippi, as well as Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So we wanted to do something to do that. I don't know if y'all have noticed about how many times I talk about Lincoln on the show. Lincoln. Oh, my gosh. Talk about a brain fart. Talk about Lee on the show, that I'm a big Robert E. Lee fan. I've read a lot of books about him. I love the guy. A lot of inspiration I take from, just how to handle life situations from him. So I always love the idea and push for kind of a Robert E. Lee theme episode whenever I can. I try to sneak it into GCB whenever I can. The episodes of this week were going to be Robert E. Lee themed. Yeah, I dropped the dreaded Lincoln word. I'm going to be in trouble for that. But tonight, Matt's still moving, Candyman's still moving, so he wasn't going to be able to be on. GCB is actually sick, and he wasn't going to be able to be on. And all three of us were going to be talking about Lee the last years. And I don't like doing the show alone. I always think it's good to have one of the team on, talk to them, or have a guest on. So when it was just going to end up being me talking about the Lee book, I've read the book. I feel confident in my ability to talk about the book, but it's also good to have two more people talking about it. So we kind of transitioned. We will be having a SCV Chat special on Wednesday doing the Lee book review. Today we're going to be, I celebrated Lee Jackson Day yesterday. I posted about it a bit. I went out to Confederate cemeteries, Confederate monument in town, paid my respects, and just celebrated the day on my own time. But Victor said that it was in Friday. I know a lot of people celebrated it in Virginia on Friday in Lexington. And we'll be talking more about that on Thursday on Look Around the Confederation. But tonight we just want to talk about Jackson, talk about Lee a little bit, and of course just have a good time. So yeah, that's why we moved everything, and why tonight's episode got switched completely within the last hour. Bless our hearts. Yeah, again, poor Connor is sick, and poor Matt is moving, and I hate moving, so I don't know how he is. But we have as I said, the Lieutenant Commander-in-Chief on, Jason. How are you doing tonight, Jason?
I'm doing fine, young man. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm doing good. Can't complain. Can't complain. For those who don't know, I've had an ear infection for the past couple of weeks. Finally have a doctor's appointment tomorrow. So if you see me leaning into my computer or just staring blank face, it's because I cannot hear. My dad makes the joke that I'm the oldest 22-year-old he knows because I have bad hearing and bad eyesight naturally. So the ear infections made it 10 times worse. I didn't hear my alarm today, and it went off for a good solid hour while I was up, might I add. My dog was the one that finally barked at it, and I was like, what are you barking at? I went in my room, saw my alarm was still going off. But hey, thank you guys for being so kind. With that, I think we have everybody on, a good crowd to start the show. With that, I don't think we have anything else to talk about. I guess I'll give everybody a quick couple seconds left. I'm going to play the now famous Forest trailer that Jebo was nice enough to provide. And we're going to play that, and we're going to get into tonight's program. We also got one more thing we'll play sometime in the middle of the show, probably for our Pop-Tart break. But without further ado, I'll play the Forest trailer, and we'll get into tonight's program.
It started about 3 years ago. A controversy began with the political correct movement that was taking place in Memphis, and Forrest became a lightning rod.
They created a nonprofit group, a puppet organization, went in there in the middle of the night and removed the statue in violation of a number of laws.
Even if the statue got put back up, it wouldn't last a week. It'd be vandalized, destroyed, and that's when they started thinking about, well, why don't we move them?
We knew we had to move them to Middle Tennessee. We had to move them to the place where Forrest was born.
Man, I love that trailer. I get goosebumps every time. A lot of people today, in my generation, we love movie trailers. We talk about them all the time. We always send messages to each other. Have you watched this yet? And we talk about the excitement and the hair standing up on your arm or on the back of your neck, and how it just makes you feel, and how it adds to your emotion. It brings out your emotions. And that Forest trailer, oh my gosh, does it do that for me? I'm a big movie and TV guy, so I watch all the trailers. I watch a lot of TV shows. I watch a lot of movies. And that trailer right there for General Forrest gives me more emotion, goosebumps up and down my spine, like Miss Dottie said. It just, every time I watch it, it's breathtaking. And I love it, and I'm happy that Jebo was able to share that with us here. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Jebo. Jebo, if you want to talk about the crazy circumstances, we all keep a busy schedule. And, of course, being the Lieutenant Commander-in-Chief, Jebo has a very busy schedule. And it was by a miracle that he was able to come on tonight and talk about Jackson. And he has I think a mini story he could tell.
Yes, I can talk about it a little bit. First, I want to begin by saying that today we lost a beautiful lady by the name of Nelma Crutcher, who's with the United Daughters of the Confederacy. She passed away on us this morning, from what I understand. I met Miss Crutcher, I'm guessing, close to 5 years ago. She was I think they call it the President General of the United Daughters of the Confederacy when I met her. And the Forest Hall marker had just come down off of Vanderbilt, and it was in possession of the Tennessee Division, UDC, and they have graciously offered to put that up at Elm Springs. It was supposed to have already happened by now. It hasn't. Talking with the gentleman that's a contractor, it's going to be any time that he can get his crew there. He's like everybody else, he's been having to run a very skeleton crew, and he hasn't got his brick and block layers there. But as soon as that happens, that will be put up. But Miss Crutcher, Miss Nelma Crutcher was. I met her then, and I loved her from the moment one. Just being around her and being listening to her. She was a very kind lady. She was a very generous lady, a very loving lady, and to lose her, and it breaks my heart. I'm She was something else, and I miss her. Just thinking about her and her family right now. She was a very devout Southern lady, and she will be missed. And my hearts go out to everybody in the UDC and everybody in the SCV who knew her and had met her and had been around her, because she will be missed. And I wanted to start off by mentioning her. How I am here tonight is really this come up maybe 6:15 or 6:30, 30 to 45 minutes ago. I was not supposed to be on tonight. I was supposed to be at the Rutherford County Historical Society doing a talk on Sam Davis, but Middle Tennessee has fallen under a blanket of snow. Where I am in southern Middle Tennessee, in a little town called Mount Pleasant, there's 5 inches in my yard. It's scattered around. Some places have as much as 7 and 8 here in Tennessee. Some have as little as 1 or 2. But as what happens in a southern state, when snow does fall, there's a whole lot of chaos that goes on, and they start canceling everything immediately. And the Rutherford County Historical Society, they canceled that. So I was here at the house instead of there. And then as Moose said, that we've got all these Matt's still moving, Connor's sick. It's just a it just I just happened to be here and happened to be able to fill in. Now I know that they were reading the book on Lee and talking about Lee, and yes, I'm a Robert E. Lee fan. I have read quite a bit about him. I like the book that contained a bunch of his own dispatches, the letters that he wrote, since they are coming from the first person. This book that they were going to talk about tonight, I did not read. I have not read it, but it might be something that I try to actually try to read before they get together on Wednesday, and see if I can get in here and maybe be part of the conversation with that. My interest for Thomas Jonathan Jackson began a number of years ago. Being out of Middle Tennessee, I was very familiar with all the people here in Tennessee. Your Forrest and all of those. And even though I did follow Lee and Jackson a little bit, I really began to get a great deal of interest in Jackson, based off a gentleman that I met from the Franklin Civil War Roundtable, fellow by the name of Tim Johnson. And Tim Johnson, I believe, is a instructor at Belmont College in Nashville, and he was a studier of the Mexican War. And as you know, a lot of our soldiers and a lot of our generals come out of the Mexican War. They actually fought side by side with each other. And through him talking about the Mexican War, I began to get a lot of interest in that. And that is where you realize that probably during that time, while they were in Mexico City for those, I believe, 9 months, Jackson and Lee would have met each other. Now that was during we don't know when they first met. We know that they were not together in school. There was too much of an age difference, so they were never at West Point together. So sometime during their service, they would have come across each other, and that probably would have been sometime during the Mexican War. Um, I'm gonna stop right there. Do you have anything to say, Moose, or you're just kind of standing there? Okay.
No. It's gonna sound weird. My ear started ringing just right now, so I was sitting here and I was like, just confused about my ear. That was that facial expression. But
Okay. All right. In case you need to say something, just go ahead and jump right in.
oh yes,
Before we get into the whole talk, I want to thank some people brought up about the forest trailer. Right now, we have gotten um, some more footage that we're wanting to put in on the disinterment. We have received that. That's in the process of being plugged in. Then I imagine there's going to be some finishing touches. I've already seen the first hour of it, and it's pretty interesting. As you can imagine, uh, the I was there when the graves were dug. The grave digger that you see there, I was there when the ground was broken and when that was done. And it starts with that, with the camera showing the house and then the scoop coming down and starting to dig. It starts there, and then there's a little bit of a conversation about us standing there talking about how we're going to fill in the graves. So you will see me in extremely casual attire. I've got a great big hat on, and but it was an interesting it was an interesting time, and to actually see the video itself. There have been some suggestions about people just being able to see the entire service. Now that we might put out, that's going to be left up to what we decide on. After we get to looking at everything. The video looks like the whole documentary looks like it's still going to be in the hour and 20-minute range, depending on what we're going to. There's some pieces of it that during some of the speechifying that we're going to call back on a little bit to put it into a very concise deal. Might need to do more than one DVD, one that covers the whole service. Uh, yes, and I think the last time we talked about that, past Commander in Chief McMichael brought that up, and I'm wonderful with that idea. The service itself is 45, 50 minutes long, so it's going to. To when I brought up that we might cut some of it out, I ended up getting a message asking, "Are you going to cut out Reverend Herman White?" And no, sir, we're not going to cut anything out that Reverend Herman White said. That appears to be some people who have talked to me one of the most motivational pieces that they have heard, and I agree. I'm good with that. So we're going to be proceeding along with that. I did see on the comments scrolling across that the Mouton camp is on here watching. I had the privilege of this past Tuesday night. I was down in Foley, Alabama with the Fort Blakely camp, 1864, at their Lee Jackson. And it was a wonderful event. Tommy Rhodes and that camp, they are a fantastic group of guys. They work themselves. They're always active. They're always in the middle of something. And I was honored to be down there. This past Saturday night, I was in Opelousas, where the Mouton camp is, and I was their speaker at their Lee Jackson. So they're going to hear some of what I said Saturday night. They're going to hear it again. How I got home was we got back to the hotel room, and they've been calling for very bad weather here. And we decided, you know what, we're going to try to beat it home. So I left the Opelousas at about 10 o'clock on Saturday night and drove all night Saturday night. Ended up getting here and somewhere around 8 o'clock in the morning. So it's a 10-hour drive. It's 611 miles was what it was, it didn't snow on us in Louisiana, but we come out on 10 and then turn north on 55. And then after we got on 20 around Meridian, it started snowing on us. And we had about, I'm going to say 15 miles of snow. And at one time, it was pretty close to a whiteout. And I was down to running about 20 miles an hour. I was following an 18-wheeler that had a very shiny back. And that was about all I could see was the back of that 18-wheeler for quite some time. And of course, the road was slick and sliding in a little bit, but the road was covered. You couldn't see the lines. So I was just following in the tracks of that 18-wheeler. After we ran out of that, somewhere around Tuscaloosa, we just ran into rain from there all the way till we hit about Athens, Alabama. And then at Athens, it turned into snow again, and it snowed on us the rest of the way here. By the time we got here, we had about an inch on the ground. And it's a good, wet, heavy, blanketed snow. So it's, there for a handful of hours, it was kind of interesting. But that is the reason why, because we were going to drive back on Sunday. If we would have waited to have drove back on Sunday, we wouldn't have made it. The roads yesterday, they were bad. So we, glad that we drove it the rest of the way in. I want to thank the Mouton Camp. They were absolutely wonderful to talk to. Great group of guys, fantastic food. They had a group cater it. I think they said they used them 4 or 5 times. The food was unbelievable, and the guys were great. So it was an absolute honor to be with the Mouton Camp, and it was a great honor to be with the Fort Blakely Camp. I spent some time with them, and great group of guys as well. So I see you're laughing about something.
I think past Commander-in-Chief Paul Gramblin was saying that you could stay with him.
You know what? It would have been an honor to stay with the legend and Miss Legend. It would have absolutely been an honor to stay with them. Paul is, as everybody who knows who's been around him, he's just he was a great commander-in-chief, and he is just equally a great guy. So if I would have had to drive up to Shreveport, and I wasn't going near Shreveport, so that wasn't going to happen. And I want to thank both the camps that have had me. I've got one coming up this coming Saturday. I'm going to be in Knoxville speaking to the Knoxville camp. Big camp, great group of people. Then I'll be in Tallahassee, Florida. So I've got 3 Lee Jacksons and 4 Lee Jacksons in January, and we just need to call January Lee and Jackson month because
Yes.
I think that we just need to just okay, this is to them, because one of the things I'm going to talk about tonight is the love for their men and their respect for their men, and when you honor them, you're actually honoring the men that served with them, because Lee and Jackson both thought a great deal of their men, and that could actually be stated in was stated in Jackson's farewell address. Lee's farewell address of how he felt about his men. So it's been an honor going to so many, and I've got a few more to go. So, and thank you for having me on tonight. I feel like I seem to be the guy that you call when nobody else will come on. I kind of feel like that raccoon that's out by the dumpster eating out of the dumpster, and every now and then you go out there and you say, "Hey, we need somebody to come on and talk." So I'm kind of like the trash panda of anything else. But thank you for having me on. I'm always honored. This is SCV Chat is something that I dearly love and respect. So I'm gonna turn it over to you in case you have something to say.
I got a little bit. Me and you share a similar story on our trip that I think you'll get a joy of. But first I'm gonna comment on the raccoon joke. Uh, no, it's just when I'm hosting personally. For those that know, either I can be very quiet on the show or I can be very talkative on the show. There's no in between. But I know that when Jason's on, it's going to be a good show. And so anytime that, and he helped me out first off when Look Around the Confederation was just getting started. We had me and Matt had scheduling conflicts. So I wouldn't be on one night. Matt wouldn't be on one night. If y'all remember, it originally started on Wednesday. And then I think, Matt had neck surgery. And so there's a period of time, and GCB can't come on Thursdays because he's working. So there's a time that I just got Jason on for like 4 straight weeks of me and him talking about sometimes very good programs. Sometimes it was legit just me and Jason talking on the show. And so ever since then, if I know I'm going to be either alone on the show or I don't have a guest, I always invite. I always first go see if Jason can be on because I always just love having you on. I always feel like we have a good time. But
Yeah, we do. I enjoy being on. It's I like it when other people are on and I can sit and listen. Mm-hmm. I've been to a couple events where I was not the speaker, where I'm just the guy that's sitting out there and enjoying it, and that's kind of fantastic. There's times when y'all are on, I'll just pull it up and I'll listen, and every now and then I'll comment. You've seen my comments come across, but I just, it's an honor to be on here, and I enjoy it, and thank you for your consideration. Hopefully, I'm not too boring. That is one thing that I have learned, and I learned it when I learned this one thing when I was sitting in the audience for so many of these. The last thing you need to be is boring. You need to actually have a good subject, and you need to present it in a certain way. And if anybody has heard me talk, I don't use notes. I just talk. It's we all know this material. We might not know some of all the details. Red or frop, Carl Jones. No food more in an elevator, baby. You just don't. We all know it, so you just get on there and you talk about it. And there's times, and I can't help it, and I might get this way tonight when we're talking about it. When we're talking about Jackson, and we start talking about his wife Ann and her with him those last couple of days, it starts getting emotional.
Yeah.
To me, it does. And even though I've talked about Sam Davis for years now, I still get emotional when we start talking about. I have only some of the things that Sam said, and imagining what his mama went through, and thinking about what his daddy went through. I have only one life to live. I'm not going to betray. His mama coming to the window and looking out and seeing the wagon with the coffin in back. When you start talking about that kind of stuff, it does get emotional. So, and that's because it means a lot to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was laughing right there because, I'm going to give J-Bo some credit. So, Southern men, don't cry, in my high school, it was a running
John
joke.
Wayne.
Yeah. You John Wayne. It was actually an expression. Like if you got punched really hard at practice or hit really hard and you felt tearing up, there was actually a bleacher you could go to and get under for a minute, so you could get all the emotions out and then come back on the field and act like nothing happened.
Yeah,
and that's an attribute that has stuck with me a bit in life, and I will give J-Bo the credit when he's telling his programs, when he's telling his stories, and he's telling the stories of our Confederate heroes. our Confederate veterans, our ancestors. He is the only person to date that I always feel emotion, but dag nabbit, if I have teared up every time J-Bo has talked about Sam's story. J-Bo brings out the emotion, and you feel the pain that they must have felt back then. When you lost a son, when you lost a father, when you lost a brother, when you lost a husband. And ever since then, I don't know if J-Bo remembers it. It was the first night I called him my father when he told that story. And I was not expecting that story because we were filming it. And I looked at Connor. I was like, if you put this camera on me, I will end the live stream. Because I was tearing up. And ever since then, it's been a lot easier, I guess is the way to say it, for me to connect to the veterans ever since hearing that story. And it opened up a new chain of thought that I never thought of with trying to connect to these people on an emotional level. Because, in humanity in general, you'll put people on a pedestal and you won't think of them as human. In the book, it even talks about how people in the last year's book, talks about how a lot of people put Lee on this, giant hero pedestal.
Mm-hmm.
And in the book, it talks a lot more about him as a human, as a person. And it's a lot easier to connect with that. Robert E. Lee was a great hero, but he was also flesh and blood just like the rest of us. And for J-Bo, I cannot thank him enough for opening that channel of thought in my head, and I've connected with a lot more Confederate stories since then.
Yeah. What hurt? I don't know that hurt is the actual right word for that. Sometimes you search for the right word, but can you imagine what it was like to be Robert E. Lee after the war?
Oh gosh.
I mean, I have nothing to compare it to. So I'm spitballing when I try to bring anything out like that. I can't imagine what it was like to be him. When the war was over, he was still a hero. He was a hero to so many, and he was flesh and blood. He was a human being. He had a heart, a soul, a mind, a family, responsibilities, obligations, houses to run, businesses to run. And in the middle of all of that, what was it like for him to even go get a cup of coffee? Imagine, coming out of his house and going to the grocery store, like we would say nowadays. It's. I'm going to relate it to this. There was a story many years ago that I saw about Michael Jordan, the basketball player. And they were talking about when did you realize that you were really famous? And it become how many autographs he signed every time he stopped at a gas station just to get gas. Every time that, if you think about that, all of these people that served under Lee, all these men that knew Lee, all these men said that, they served with Robert E. Lee, and now their son sees them, their grandson sees them. He become an attraction all to himself. He was making a train trip one time, and if you want to talk about that, you can. But you want to talk about it? Go ahead.
I'll glare over it. Just not to steal too much from you, but
Now don't. You're not stealing anything. Talk about him.
But earlier we were talking about how Robert E. Lee cared for his men, and General Jackson cared for his men. So much that after Appomattox, when General Lee's riding home, he sees a couple soldiers on the side of the road just walking, and he stops. He takes out a map and he helps them find a better way home.
Yeah,
and so it shows his love. And then on the train story, towards the end of his life, Robert E. Lee took a trip. The college basically begged him to take a break because they saw that his health was in decline, and they thought that it was the stress of the job, and they, of course, wanted Robert E. Lee around as long as the good Lord would keep him around. So they thought it'd be in his best interest to take a trip. And bless their hearts, I don't think they understood the stress and the pressure they were about to put on him, because every stop Robert E. Lee made on this trip, And because it soon got word around that Robert E. Lee was going on a trip. He was going to be traveling to all these new places and places he hasn't been in a long time. And so it got to the point where these huge crowds would just just all of a sudden start to form just to see a passing glimpse of the train. And then if the train made a stop, the crowd would be even bigger, chanting Lee's name and wanting him to come out and speak and wave. And of course, Robert E. Lee wasn't feeling well. He was a lot older. His poor heart was finally taking its toll on him. The stress of the war was finally, I guess, really catching up with him, I guess isn't a term. But I mean, he was an older gentleman at the time. So to go out every time a big crowd came, because at first he wasn't. At first he would wave from them at the train. But then sooner or later, people started asking for speeches and people started asking to talk and just to see Robert E. Lee. And Robert E. Lee cared so much about his men, so much about the South, so much about the people here, that he would start going out and talking to the people, giving speeches. And, J-Bo is someone who travels a lot and someone who gives a lot of programs, speeches, talks. I bet you can attest to, after doing it for a long period of time, it gets draining. Because you give a lot to that. When you're in a crowd, and especially the way you talk, J-Bo, from what I've noticed, is you give a lot of yourself into that.
Uh-huh.
That can be tiring. Now, imagine doing that with a weak heart. You're not feeling well, and you're trying to travel. But every time you go somewhere, there's just swarms of people just wanting, and they came just to see you.
Mm-hmm.
And him being a man of honor that he is, he felt obligated to do that.
Yes, he did. Being Confederate General Robert E. Lee got to be a burden.
Mm-hmm.
It was an obligation. It was because it was an obligation to him. He felt he was something he needed to do. His love for mankind, he was a deeply religious man.
Mm-hmm.
And if it was something he felt he needed to do, then he felt like it would have been doing a dishonor to himself. It would have been doing a dishonor to the people and have been doing a dishonor to his God. Mm-hmm. So he had this deep moral obligation to be Robert E. Lee. And to be Robert E. Lee 24 hours, 7 days a week itself had to be just an enormous burden. It was a weight that the only way he could get out of it was actual death. But the weight of still being Robert E. Lee is still being felt today. Mm-hmm. Just look at the number of people that had this outpouring of anger with everything that has happened to the statues and Richmond and everything else. Losing him off Lee Circle in New Orleans, that really aggravated me because I used Lee Circle in New Orleans as a point of reference whenever I journeyed to New Orleans. That was a measuring spot. Okay, I could always go back to Lee Circle because I knew where I was. So it became a unit of measure. And, just being Robert E. Lee was such a burden that, every time, even if the train stopped, he felt this, if he knew it was coming, he had to prepare himself. Then it got to be, when you're first going out and you're talking, and you're speechifying and you're doing all of this, what's coming and you can prepare for what's coming. But at the point where it was constant. He was approached. He never had time to prepare. He had to always be prepared. He had to always have 5, 10, 15 minutes stuck in his back pocket that he could say at any point in time. And then I can imagine, because I've done it, I can take and put 5 or 10 minutes down, stick it in my pocket and pull it out at any time. But you're in the middle of that 5 minutes and you look out into the crowd and you notice the crowd and you see people and you see things, and then you start touching on those, and your 5 or 10 minutes expands out. There's just, I'm going to tell one Lee story. Then I'm going to not say anything else about Robert E. Lee. I'm going to let you talk about him. Robert E. Lee, I think the most can be said about how the man felt about everything was at the very end. He had just come out of Appomattox Courthouse. He was after being there with Grant. And if you read the books on it and you read the people who were there at the time, you listen to their accounts. He come out of the house and there was this great big round of applause and all this cheering. And they immediately realized where they were and what was happening. And the entire crowd grew silent. And he goes and gets on Traveler. And Traveler is a story all to himself.
Yeah.
He goes and he gets on Traveler. And he starts riding out amongst his men. And all of these men that he had served with, whether it had just guys that had joined within the last 3 months or the men that had served with him for the entire 4 years. All of these men started gathering around him, and as he rode past, they were touching him and they were touching Traveler. And he was overcome with emotions because the men themselves, if you read their accounts, they had their hats off, and you're looking at men who had been outdoors for all these months. So they were tanned and weathered and beat up. And, they said they were crying.
Yeah.
So if they said they were crying, I think it's okay for us to get a little teary-eyed when we're talking about them. And they were talking about the emotions they felt. And they were talking about the emotions they could see in Lee. And Lee said that his heart he removed his hat and he said his heart was too full and he could not say anything else. And a couple of days after that, he was heading toward Richmond. And he had a brother, Charles, that lived on the Upper James. And he stopped at his brother Charles's house and visited with his own brother. Now, this is his own brother. And visited with the family. And when the time came and night came and it was time for him to leave, even though they were asking and practically begging him to take a room in the house, he would not. He went out by the road and he set up his tent and he stayed in his tent like he had done so many times over the last 4 years. And I have tried to think what would cause a man to do that, because most of us would have gone and stayed at your brother's house. You would have commandeered a bed or a couch or a floor somewhere. But this man would not. And the only thing that my feeble mind can come up with is grief. The only reason why he would not impose himself on anybody was he was a gentleman. And the fact that he was experiencing the grief of what had transpired, what had taken 4 years to transpire in one morning, that he couldn't bear being around anybody during those moments where he needed to be by himself. And you realize after some time after that, Lee never had those moments where he was ever by himself anymore. He probably felt his tent was as close as he could get to his men. And the only place he could get to that gave him some solitude and where he could grieve in peace and quiet and by himself. And then as time went, the war's over. He's asked to do all of this. He goes to and works at the college, has all of these other responsibilities, and he never had that time anymore. I don't know if he ever got over the grief of what happened. I don't know the man, never met the man, and I'm not going to dare to say this was one way or another, but to go dine with your brother, but leave there and go sleep in a tent by the side of the road, I think says more about the grief he went through than anything. So that is one of the things I admire the most about Robert E. Lee. He was a man who went through the actual trials of war, lost so much, felt it so much, and he lived what he was. He wasn't anything else. I guess if you ever met Robert E. Lee, you got Robert E. Lee. You never got anything else, because he had to be himself constantly. He could never go and be by himself. He was always himself. So, and that's speculation on my part about Robert E. Lee. Go ahead and talk about him. I know you are a big fan of his. I think his farewell speech is absolutely awesome. Very heartfelt. Sometimes, after when I'm reading, I try to put my mind where he was, and it's not going through what he went through. I can't do it. You can only do it if you've been through it, and I can't do it. Yeah. Go ahead. I'll let you talk for a minute.
But yeah, I mean, oh my gosh, I just read that again today. I've read Lee the last years a lot of times, and that was probably one of the first books I ever read about the war or Lee in general. So I fell in love with it, and I got a personal bias against it that I really enjoy it, and I read it a lot just to read it. And when I reread it again this weekend to get ready for this show, and I got to about chapter 4 or 5 and making my notes for tonight's show before I realized it was going to be canceled. I had little tabs of stuff I wanted to bring up, and golly, bless its heart, it was covered. And I mean, I would probably talk on forever if it was just me on here. But when I went to the tab where it had, his last letter, and just reading it and feeling that connection he had with his men, and knowing the personal responsibility that he always took over everything, and knowing just, again, the stress that it has to be Robert E. Lee, and to know that, everywhere he goes after the war, for sure, people are always going to be there wanting to see him and hear him talk. I mean, I think I agree with you. I don't think, and of course, as you said, I can't speak for the man. I never met the man. If I met the man, I would fainted, and I don't think I could accomplish anything else more in my life. But I don't think, bless his heart, he ever had time to fully process the ending of the war, for sure, and of course everything he went through during the war. We're still going to talk about Jackson at some point. But, I mean, he lost Jackson, and Jackson was a dear friend of mine. And I might get the quote wrong. I have often got the quote wrong. Jabo said earlier something about words and trying to find the right word for everything. If you're a fan of this show, I usually do not find a good word. But, I think it was when it was after Jackson got amputated and he lost his arm. And if I'm not mistaken, Lee said, Jackson has lost his left and I my right. And every time I hear that quote, golly, you see how these two how much they meant to each other, and how much all these men meant to him. And it's just, yeah. And just to speak of losing, I have lost a great friend in my lifetime. And I'm starting to get the age where I can say I've lost multiple people that, were around my age, and that hits different than losing a family member or someone that's a little bit older. You still care for them, but it's the unexpected ones that hurt a little bit more. And to lose a close friend that hurts. And to lose him in a war, that hurts. And that's the pain I will never know. I've never served in the war. Unless they reactivate the draft, I probably won't. But you know, I agree. I don't think that he ever had time to process the stress that it put on his heart, his mind, and his soul that war did, and it affected everybody, brother versus brother. That's a term often used when I was first in the SCV as a kid. I always remember my dad explaining to me why the war between the states was so hard on people. It was brother against brother. And I mean, Dad brought it up. He's like, how would you feel if your little brother lived in, say, New York? And you know what regiment he's in, you know where he's fighting, and then all of a sudden you realize that it's across the road from you. That's where more likely your brother is. And that's how I was explained to it when I was young. And just the stress that the war brought on everybody, not less the Robert E. Lee. I mean, and of course, as his status grew in the war, it got harder. Whew. Dang,
yeah. You know, and that's the way that I think about things is, you know, I don't know what the man went through, but I can't imagine what being Robert E. Lee, you know, does to a man. But he is definitely a hero to so many. He is a hero to me. He is flesh and blood, though. You know, we have to remember our heroes that are walking this earth, that they're human, and you know they're going to make mistakes. They're going to do things that I disagree with, that I myself would not have done. Gettysburg. But you know, the problems that we have there are just a difference of opinion. The obvious love between Jackson and Lee was there. They deeply respected each other. Not only did Lee think a lot of Jackson, but Lee needed Jackson. After his passing, Lee had this to say about Jackson, and I'm going to paraphrase. I did not have to give him give him details on anything. Just a mere suggestion of what he might need to do was all it took. Was all that was needed, and that tells you that he relied on Jackson. He definitely relied on Jackson's men. And we're starting to get well on into time, and we probably don't need to get into the whole Jackson talk. I might can come back another time and do.
I didn't realize how late we were.
Yeah, that we come back and do the Jackson talk another time. Save some people some grief of having to hear it, because a few people have already heard it. But their love for each other goes well beyond. You know, Jackson said this about Lee, that you know, because a lot of people during the war, a lot of Confederates and a lot of people in the Confederate press did not like Lee, and they wrote bad things about Lee. They talked about how he moved too slow and that he was too cautious. Jackson had this to say: he was cautious, but he needed to be, and he was the only man that he would follow blindfolded. So he obviously believed in Lee. He obviously had trust in Lee, and Lee obviously had trust in him. And he definitely needed Jackson and Jackson's infantry. Since we're not going to get into the whole Jackson talk, I'm going to leave with this one Jackson deal. If you think about Coca-Cola in the 1930s, they had an ad that featured Stonewall Jackson, because the way Jackson marched his men was something that I don't think had ever been done before and never thought about before. to where, he would march them for 45 minutes, 50 minutes, and then pause them, stop them for 10 or 15 minutes, give them a rest, and take off again. So Coke come up with this expression, the pause that refreshes. And some people are older or might have seen the ads. The Coca-Cola ads back in the day actually pictured Stonewall Jackson. And now I know Coca-Cola was created by a Confederate. I know it was. But can you imagine what people would think about those Coke ads nowadays that actually picture Jackson with the pause that refreshes? And it was talked about Jackson in the ad. It talked about how he treated his men. They were pretty much footed cavalry is what they were. He moved them at such paces. He obviously did some things that others had not done before. He was obviously very good to his men. His men thought a great deal of him, because on Sunday, May the 10th, somewhere around 10 o'clock in the morning, Major Pendleton, he was Major Pendleton then, it wasn't Colonel Pendleton. Major Pendleton entered his tent, and this was just about 5 hours before he passed. And Jackson asked him who was preaching the Sunday service. And he said that we're all going to be praying for you. And he said that is a good thing. And Jackson even said this, that by God's will, he was actually getting to die on the date that he wanted. He always wanted to die on a Sunday. How can you fault these men for anything that they have done? They were obviously never thinking about themselves in any of this. If you will study what they've done and read for yourself, don't sit here and take my word for it. Pick the book up themselves. Read Hunter McGuire's book, Dr. Hunter McGuire, the surgeon that tended to him after he was wounded in the wilderness. Read his account and all the things that Jackson said. And as far as his nickname goes, how he got his nickname. That is all very familiar, how he got his nickname. But he said that belonged to the men. It never belonged to him. That he felt like at some point in time, some of those men, if not all of them that served under him, would say that they were in Stonewall's brigade, because that's what they were called, was Stonewall Brigade. It did not belong to him, that it belonged to the men. And how true. How many men after the passing of Jackson and 10 years, 20 years, 30 years after the war wrote that they were part of Stonewall's brigade? And that was an honor about the man. So Buddy Bear said, learned a lot about Lee tonight. There's a whole lot of very good books, a lot of firsthand accounts of Lee. There's quite a few diaries that were written during the time of the war that were soldiers under Lee. Some of them written after the war, many of them written after the war. And they will count their time serving under Lee. Not that I'm against any book that is written nowadays, but a lot of those firsthand accounts, they're just treasures. I mean, the guys that kept the diaries, and if you read those, even Sam Watkins of Company H talks about meeting Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee showed up at their camp one time and was just going there to talk to the generals. And even Sam Watkins talked about what a kind and caring man he was, his mannerisms, his facial expressions, how he greeted the men, how he talked to the men. He was a true Southern gentleman, and he was a man amongst men. And how somebody could defile anything having to do with him, I don't understand. And I tell people that nowadays when they talk about some things that happen, I'm going, you're asking me to explain something. My mind can't go there. Because if you know the man, if you've read about the man, um, come on, you're basing it off of, well, I don't know what you're basing it off of. Somebody else's words, some other propaganda and lies that have been put out there. Pick up the book and read for yourself. I'm not even asking you to trust me on this. I'm asking you to go pick up Hunter McGuire's book and read it. His wife Anna wrote a book. Read it. Don't trust my word for it. I want you to do your own research. I want you to do your own study. I want you to feel and try to grasp what these men went through. Because when you remember them, people say, well, it's not all about Lee and it's not all about Jackson. Okay. But when you honor those men, you honor all the men that served underneath them. And just like it tells you in the Bible, if you go and you visit your parents' grave or your grandparents' grave or your great grandparents' grave, you are remembering and honor all of those people before them. When you talk about Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, Nathan Bedford Forrest, James Longstreet, and the list goes on and on and on. When you start talking about them, you're starting to remember all of the men that served underneath them. And that's what it's about. I'll be quiet for a while.
Well, I don't think there's anything I can add to that, JPO. I think that's a perfect way to end tonight's show. I mean, you can't top that. Thank you for coming on again.
I didn't mean to be preachy. If you need me to come on another time, if I'm able to, I'll be more than happy to. I ask that the just let me know at least 10 or 15 minutes ahead of time. Because you have called me about the time it's starting. Remember that time?
I've called him at 6:50 before.
Yeah,
maybe even 6:55, and asked Jabo to be on. But thank you again, Jabo. We'll definitely have to have you back on.
And if you need me back on, I'm more than happy to. If you need me to come back on and do a Jackson talk, I'll be more than happy to. I just know that we're getting awful late to start that.
Yeah. Let me see here real quick. I'm looking up the SCV chat schedule. If people are wondering.
Let's talk about some of the things that we still have going on at Elm Springs. We have the bricks, we have the pavers. Still haven't had a chance to talk to our gentleman about the benches. I've kind of been on the road quite a bit. And yes, I know I have the date wrong on that. The day itself is right. I did not change the year. Forgive me for that. We're still working on our keynote speaker for that event. I'll just go ahead and tell you, we're hoping to have a lady from the United Daughters of the Confederacy. My love and respect for the UDC, it goes deeper than anything that I can put to words. The ladies are they're so responsible for everything having to do with what their husbands, their fathers, their brothers went through. And, they started before the war was ever ended. And during a time when we were going through Reconstruction, there wasn't any kind of money. They were just scratching around with the chickens to try to make ends meet at that time. And once we started having a little money come back into the South, what's the first thing they do? They start putting up memorials to them. And they're memorials. People want to call them monuments, but when you go to the courthouse lawn and it says dedicated to the memory of, that's a memorial. That's because their baby boy, their brother, their husband, their father is buried on some field somewhere, and they never got to come home. And they're memorializing them, and they're remembering them. And, and they started, and they did it for so many years. And I love the UDC. I want the UDC and the SCV to be able to work together. I think that we obviously share a common birthright, but I would like to see us work together and support each other. Anything that I could do to help support the UDC, I would more than happy to do. And I would just, hope to have a UDC lady there to be our speakers. We had the the current Tennessee Division president that was our speaker for the very first one. I would love to have another one there to be our speaker this time. Then we got the memorial service, and of course that's coming up on May the 7th. Make sure if you're going to be there, bring an umbrella or bring suntan lotion. This is Tennessee, and you have no idea which way the mop's going to flop. So just plan for anything and just hope it ends up the way it does. And I saw, we got the Stephen D. Lee Symposium coming up down in Beauvoir. I will be there for that. I'm sure Paul Gramlin's going to be there since he is one of our speakers. And we've got so much that's going to be coming up. And of course, we're getting to start planning on April and all of the events that come along with Confederate History Month. So, everybody keep Elm Springs in your mind. Keep our general headquarters staff in your heart and mind. Adam Southern, our executive director, he's been sick, as well as David Cost. And if anybody has been around David Cost and you've been around Elm Springs, David Cost is as solid as a rock, and he has had health issues for a little while now. And I'm praying for him and wishing for him the best. Then I ask for everybody to remember the family of UDC lady Nelma Crutcher. To me, hearing that this morning, waking up to hear that, as soon as I get on my phone, I'm starting to read stuff about that, and absolutely breaks my heart about her. So, do you have anything else you need to say there?
Just closing the show.
Okay.
All right. Are you good?
I'm good.
All right. Please join us Wednesday for our special episode. We will be doing Lee the Last Years, the book review, hopefully. J-Bo, you're more than welcome to show up. I know you talked about hopefully trying to read the book beforehand.
Yep.
If you do, you're more than welcome to come on.
I'm a pretty quick reader, so it might be something that I delve into. Actually, I've got several books on the table. I'm trying to finish up now. I've gotten on a Patrick Claiborne kick over the last little bit, so I've been reading several Claiborne books. So, it's an interesting time. We have a wonderful history. We have a beautiful history. We need to remember it. We need to honor it. And I ask everybody out there to remember and honor all your ancestors.
Amen.
Yeah.
And then we got a nice treat for you guys Thursday. We'll be talking the Lexington Lee Jackson celebration had a big media coverage. And much like most media, they're taking a negative spin on it. So we are asking everybody, all hands on deck, to send your Lee Jackson pictures, either from Lexington or anywhere. If you however you celebrated Lee Jackson Day, please send them for the show this Thursday. We will be giving it the coverage it deserves, the coverage that is right. First of all.
Yeah. See, and during and this is, I try to watch my tongue. So I'm gonna try to watch my tongue here. But while this was going on during Lee and Jackson, they were sandblasting his name off VMI.
I heard about that.
Now, if that isn't backhanding somebody, I mean, and I'm trying to be nice. Man, I can't even come close to understanding that nonsense.
No, and the specific fact that they waited to around Lee Jackson Day and his birthday.
Yeah.
They did
Yeah.
that on purpose.
Well, okay, it's just like the people in Memphis that take them down 901. That was because Memphis is a 901 area code, and there was a group called Take Them Down 901. When they took the equestrian statue off Nathan Bedford Forrest and his wife's grave, they waited until 901 before they started to remove it. So they are aware. So these people that say, well, they don't really know, they know.
They know what
Okay?
they're doing.
They know. Okay.
They're trying to be as disrespectful as they can. And again, if that's getting under your skin, again, we're
It
dedicating
should.
a good.
It should get under your skin.
We're
It should
dedicating.
make you mad.
Yeah. It should make your blood boil. And
Yes.
and if it is, please send how you celebrated Lee Jackson Day. Either like I did, I had a quiet day at home. I went out to a Confederate cemetery, Confederate monument, a Confederate memorial, and paid my respects. I explained the history of these memorials to a group of kids and their parents. I even took their Christmas card in front of the monument and explained it to a couple other people. And then I came home. I watched Gods and Generals with my dog. I cooked burgers, and I read the last bit of Lee the Last Years. And so whatever you did for Lee Jackson Day, either you were in Lexington, I cannot pronounce it right today, at this big moment where everything's getting the media coverage, or you were at home, Mississippi, I don't care. Send all your pictures to scvyouthOutreach@gmail.com, scrolling on the bottom of the screen. And this Thursday on Look Around the Confederation, we will be giving a good portion of our time just talking about Lee Jackson Day, because it's gotten a lot more press coverage than like they're on a mission to attack us. Like normally they wouldn't even care, but with all the press coverage I've seen on it, they are trying to attack us for celebrating this day. So let's show everybody the positive, the real truth about what happened Friday and what happened this weekend with Lee Jackson Day. I kind of call it Lee Jackson weekend because it jumps around which states.
It's Lee Jackson month. It's Lee Jackson month.
Lee Jackson.
January's Lee Jackson month. Pull up Carl Jones's last statement.
All right, let me look for it.
Okay, it should be in that last thing. Okay. Yes. Read that, and read it again, and then read it again.
I couldn't agree more, Carl. Golly, I love Carl. He always hits the nail on the head, and that's true. They hate America. They hate anyone who opposes them and their goals. It's total destruction. If you are against them, they utterly hate you and want the worst for you in your life. And that is awful to say. But there are people that I've never met. There are people that have only found my SCV page or found SCV chat, and I've had the privilege of dealing with them. And all they want to do is hate. And I see that, and it hurts. I dealt with a bit of that today. And I dealt with a bit of that, or was it yesterday? Yesterday, yes. And so, that's their goal, and you can't let it get to you. We have to rise above them. We are the Southern gentlemen. We are, first off, raised better, and we know better. And we have to fight the way our ancestors know that we're honoring them, and not to dishonor their memory. But that is their goal. And we have to educate too, yeah. Yes, sir.
But we have to address it.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. I'm going to ask you to put Carl Jones' statement back up there.
All right.
Okay. And if we do nothing else today, tonight, during this show, we'll end the show with that.
Mm.
Now, yes, this is about Lee and Jackson. The attacks lately have been directly aimed at them. Directly. Lee statue taken down, cut to pieces. Stonewall Jackson, Thomas Jonathan Stonewall Jackson, had his name blasted off VMI during this whole thing. If this does not get addressed at some point, yes, we have to act like gentlemen. Yes, I agree with that completely. But you cannot sit idly by and push this to the side.
Amen. And I know a lot of people that try to do that.
You can't say, well, you know what? I'm not going to address this. Even the stuff I talked about earlier that I said makes absolutely no sense to me. It doesn't make any sense. But that don't mean I'm going to leave it alone. I'm going to poke at it like it's a sore, because even though I don't understand it, this still has to be addressed.
Mm-hmm.
Because the worst thing that a good man can do is to sit silent and let evil reign.
Amen. Amen.
That, if we don't leave anything with that, that is the heart and soul of our enemy. They hate America. They hate everyone who opposes them, and their goal is total destruction. Okay, the Kennedy brothers have already been approaching this. Excuse me, the Kennedy twins already get blasted for calling them the Kennedy brothers, but the Kennedy twins have been addressing this for a number of years. It started all the way back with Paul Grambling, and I don't mean that as bad as it was an historical event 30 billion years ago. But Paul Grambling, when he was commander-in-chief, started this take back the narrative, and the Kennedy brothers were in the heart and center of that. And that is what we need to be doing. We need to be taking back the narrative, and we should have the narrative in our hands. The Sons of Confederate Veterans ought to be stop number one when anybody that wants to know anything about what happens between 1860 and 1865. They need to know we need to be spot number one. We need to be the only spot that they go. But we're not, because they'll pull some history teacher out of the middle of nowhere that is going to say whatever they have to do to keep getting their grants and keep their job. And it's just that simple. And they're going to use them to be able to tell their story.
Yeah.
Because they're not coming to us. Because I have done 3 interviews. And I can tell you what has showed up in those 3 interviews, because they've all been published. Nothing that I have said has showed up in any of the interviews. Nothing. They never even mentioned that they interviewed me. Now, obviously, they had an agenda when they started wanting to talk to me anyway, and obviously I didn't grant it. But that obviously means that I didn't say anything else that they could use against me. Because when you go in and you start talking to any of these reporters, you treat it like it's an inquisition. You need to treat it like they're trying to give you up, trying to get you to say something that isn't true that they can use against you. So that tells you that the narrative is so far spun to one direction. But we still have to address it. It still has to be dealt with. And the reason why you need to do that is because you are a member of this organization. And if you remember Stephen D. Lee's charge, and then you also need to do it because, are you a Christian? Because a Christian tells you that you need to honor your father and your mother. And you need to remember, and you need to try to do the right thing. And you need to find out what the right thing is. How many people don't really want to know what the right thing is? So if I leave here tonight, I want everybody to know that what Carl Jones says is their ultimate goal. That is what they wish to achieve. And you having your Lee Jacksons is step one, because you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. But don't stop there. Keep on doing them. Do a Patrick Claiborne deal in March. Do something for Confederate History Month. You have to be out there. You have to be doing it. And remember that. I'm going to be quiet. I got again.
Dang it. J-Bo keeps like just knocking it out of the ballpark, not leaving any poor moose to have anything left to say.
Well, okay, and Michael Hardy is right here. That's why we have to write books and blog posts and podcasts. You're right, Michael Hardy.
Yes.
That is why we need to have shows like this. That is the reason why your show on Sunday is so good, because you are out there doing what you're supposed to be doing. It is factually correct, it is accurate, and it is the right thing to do. So we should have to fight over, are we going to be on Tuesday night or Wednesday night because we've got this on Tuesday and that on Wednesday?
Yes.
Oh, yes. We need to be full of these things. So, yes, I'm going to be quiet for a minute. I'm preachy enough.
No, I think we needed that preachy moment. I think we ended our first conversation off great, and then when we went into this, it needed to be said. And I'm not saying that because J-Bo's my friend. I'm not saying that because we're live on air. I truly mean that this needed to be said. We need to celebrate these days. We need to go out, educate, and we need to fight for what we believe in.
Well, okay, then let's just do it for one simple thing other than what Thomas Jonathan Stonewall Jackson said. That when they want to have a fight, you pull the sword and throw away the scabbard. If you want to fight, let's fight.
Yeah.
But we don't need to sit back on our hindquarters and let this stuff just slip on past because, well, we don't want trouble. Trouble's here. It's on the doorstep. The question is, are you going to address it or are you going to let it slip by?
I think you're being generous on the doorstep. I think they're trying to break down your door with a log.
Okay. Well, how much are they in your house every time you turn the TV on?
Door keeps cracking every day.
Yes.
Especially this past year, it cracked a lot.
Yes. So we need to keep on doing what we have been doing. I know that Lee and Jackson were honorable Christian men, but if you read the Bible, they did a whole lot of scrapping in that Bible. There was a lot of fighting going on, and all these people were fighting over what they believed was right.
Very true.
He doesn't tell you to not fight. He tells you to turn the other cheek. But he doesn't tell you what to do when they slap the other cheek. So keep this in mind.
Oh, I'm so happy I had you on, J-Bo.
Well, I didn't mean to get preachy, but come on, folks. We're doing what we're supposed to be doing. Keep on doing them. Honor Lee, honor Jackson, because every time you do it, they're honoring all their men that served underneath them. Do so with Patrick Claiborne. That's going to be coming up in March. Do something for Patrick Claiborne Day.
But go out and do these events. I mean, don't just celebrate the big names. Celebrate everybody, and go out. Start something new. It's always great to carry on tradition. It's always good to start a new one. And so go out, make something new, and just continue to teach our Confederate history. But with that, I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. Remember, one last time, that we have a special on Wednesday where we'll be book reviewing Lee, The Last Years. Hopefully, if everybody else gets healthy and everything goes well. And please remember to email scvyouthOutreach@gmail.com, scrolling on the bottom of the screen, for our Lee Jackson news coverage on Thursday. That's the first half of the show now. And I'm happy to announce the guest for the second half of the show. Second half of the show on Thursday, we'll be having the camp that is trying to put up a new General Robert E. Lee monument in Virginia, modeled after the one they took down in Richland. So please tune in for that. Thursday and Wednesday, same Confederate time, same Confederate channel, 7 p.m. both nights. So that means that we will not be having a rerun episode this Wednesday. It'll be the book review be taking its place. So with that, if J-Bo doesn't have anything else to say, all right.
No.
With that, I will say no Fumar in the elevator.
And red or frog.